Buchmesse 2007, die Faszination Comics. Wir berichten live vom Event des Jahres.
So, let's start. Welcome for the discussion on the International Comic Market 2007. Last year we've met for the first time here, and when you want to look, we are still the same, but somebody is missing. Chuck Rosansky from the United States wasn't able to come because he's ill, but we have still some photos of him, so he will be with us, although he has to stay in the United States because he wasn't able to have 8 hours flight in the airplane. It is too much for his back. But Chuck has also summed up our last meeting. He had written down everything from our last meeting. He had, for example, summed up what is the actual situation in Spain, that there are only a small amount of comics published in Spain, which is done by Spanish people, and so on. You may everything of this summary read at this address there, my Comicmarkt, and he sends you his best wishes. Thank you, Chuck. His homepage is this one, and he is an expert on the United States comics, and we have to start with, not with Chuck, but with Sinusa, and I want you to introduce yourself to the audience. Let's start.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. Dr. Andreas Diebs, thanks for giving me the opportunity again to come back to this panel. And for the audience, I hope you have some interesting time this afternoon. And first of all, as you see, this is, I'm the director of manga and fiction at Tatomori Agency. The beginning of this agency goes back to 1948, right after the Second World War, and it was created by an American who came to Japan as an officer after the war. He created the beginning of this agency to span the East and West, and now, even after 60 years, this is still the motto and mission of our agency. And for manga, we started to work in licensing of manga overseas in '91, and now 16 years later, we work with 31 countries and 19 languages. And for example, we had the privilege to work with Dragon Ball in the past, and now with Full Metal Alchemist and Fruits Basket, as well as such prominent artists as Mr. Koike Karuzo and Mr. Taniguchi Jiro. So from very popular titles to more artistic authors as well.
Thank you very much. Then Mr. Berenguer might be the next to tell us something on this comic. You see, Bardin, it's pronounced like this?
Yes, Bardin. Bardin is this book we just published. Well, we published it some months ago in Spain, but it's been a very good experience for us and for the author, of course, because it has been published in French, in Italian, in Dutch, in English, and in Spanish, and now I think after tomorrow we are going to present it in Catalan, which we have been doing a translation, and in German too. So it is a fantastic thing that is happening in this sense, that we can count on when there is a good author, we have an audience that is almost worldwide. It's only lacking Japan and Korea.
But what is T-Comic?
T-Comic is an organization of publishers authors, distributors, and comic shop owners. And Comic organizes the Comic Festival in Barcelona every year, which is quite successful, and also the Manga Festival, which is increasingly growing since 12 years ago. So that's what Comic does.
Thank you. Then I would like ask Iwo to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Hee-Won Chung. I represent eComics from Seoul, Korea. Also, we have a company in the United States called NetComics. We do both print publishing and online publishing of manga comics. Manga is the term that is Korean term for comics. It's the same word as manga, only pronounced differently. And manga is very similar to Japanese manga in terms of the format and grammar. Almost always, except for that, the Korean books read from left to right, unlike Japanese that are read from right to left. My company is originally has started in 1998 as an online publisher of Korean manga, and it went on to publish print books in Korea, and also started a business in 2006 in the United States. So it's somewhat different from other publishers who started as a print book publisher and went on to online business. We went a different way. So we are more familiar with the technologies and how the online business side of e-books. So.
Yes, and now I want to ask Claudio to please introduce himself.
My name is Claudio Burcio. I'm the director of the Napoli Comic Con, which is the comics and animation festival in Naples. We started the festival 10 years ago, and we were thinking about doing a festival, an international festival, which means we have a lot of international guests, not only Italian artists. We had during the last years several different countries as guests, and we promote Italian comics outside Italy. Like here in Frankfurt, this is the 4th year we have this collective stand of Italian publisher. We have been in Seoul in Korea, and we have been in Angoulême, of course, and we are trying to work with other festivals in Europe to having a network of European comics festival, trying to promote European comics in our countries. And in the other countries of Europe, there are 25 countries, and only Spain, France, Italy, and Belgium are normally counted for comics. So we think it would be a good idea to try to see the situation in Europe, and we are working with the Festival of Barcelona, the Erlangen Festival of in Germany, here in Germany, and Frankfurt to have this connection and this network. And I think this panel would be interesting too for this reason. Thank you.
Yes, I've read at your homepage. I've read that you want to come here. And how has you managed to get this partnership? Do you fly?
Because now the German company, they open a direct connection with the Naples airport, so they are promoting Naples, and so we flew with them here in Frankfurt. And then this last year we had Go Nagai as a guest of honor of our festival. with my views for France, and it's how we intend our festival with a lot of artists from everywhere.
Thank you. Didier, would you please introduce?
I'm Didier Passamonique. I'm a journalist, publisher. I organize exhibitions. I'm an author of different essays about comics, and I'm the directing manager of this website, which is actuabd.com, which is the most informed website about comics in France. And also I have an agency who provides content about comics to different media in France.
We have read in actuabd this one that Egmont has bought Carlsen.
Yeah.
Very interesting for us. I've highlighted the name Carlsen very often in this article. May you explain to us this?
Yes, I think one of the characteristics of actuabd is we are interested in the different economic facts in the world of the comics. And since there is such in Denmark, how can I say, joint venture between the two main publishing groups of Denmark, which are directly involved in the publishing of comics in Germany. That a fact that anybody don't know. There is possible effect on a secondary effect on the German market of this fact who was done in Denmark. So it's just an hypothesis, but it could be a possibility, and that's it's an economic analysis that we have done in this article.
Thank you for that. We are now the question what the comic market in 2007 may have, how it may have changed, and I will ask Chigoza to explain some numbers. She brought along numbers from Japan. This one, how is the manga market in Japan in 2006?
Yes, I would like to share some statistics with you, but without getting into too many details, so it's not too boring. So I will try to do this in 7 steps. Well, it looks like most of the audience is coming from Europe, so I will first refer to France, Belgium, France-speaking countries, the most prominent countries for comics in Europe, as a reference. And in short, the total manga market in Japan is roughly 10 times the size of the whole comic market in France. And France is roughly...
You mean the manga market? The total market?
Total market, yes. So France is roughly estimated to have 500 million US dollars, and in Japan it's 4.1 billion US dollars, and this comes to about 9 to 10 times difference. But this is just for the big picture. And then in this manga market in Japan, last year the total sales fell 4.2% on the whole, so it is shrinking by 4.2%. And this comes from 2.7% minus in the paperback and a very high 5.9% for magazines. And this, in the magazines, the decline has been for 11 years in a row. And by far this is the biggest concern for publishers in Japan. There are currently more than 300 manga magazines in Japan. And in 2005, the total sales was 4.3 billion US dollars, but it fell in 2006 to to 4.1 billion US dollars. So that is, this is from all the statistics in the industry. And are there any bright or growing areas? And the growing area is the mobile phone content. And this market is increasing by a rapid 300% per year, which is very amazing, and now at the level of 30 million US dollars as of March 2006, so my figures are a little old. And so this is an area of outstanding growth. And in general, the mega hit titles are very likely to be supported by film or animation, and these days more on live action than animation, because animation hour is moving from after school evening to late at midnight. So this has been a shift in the tendency, and as a result we have mega hit titles supported by film and live action, but they are taking up majority of sales. So in fact we have less and less new talent coming in the market. So I'm afraid the picture in Japan is not rosy. It's a kind of a little gloomy, I must say. And this indicates that the manga market may be now facing a change. And what this change means to us all, maybe I can come back to this later. So this is a picture from Japan.
Thank you. Hyewon, is it in Korea like this? Especially the telephone market, mobile phone market?
Yes, it's pretty much the same, but I think the change in Korea occurred earlier than Japan. So, and the change is much faster. The mobile market has grown to quite large market, but then due to many changes and new technologies and new services on mobile phones, the growth is not that fast right now. But overall, the digital content market in Korea has grown faster than any other country. So we've been seeing rapid and dramatic changes in Korea, and it's pretty much the same in most countries, as I said, except for the emerging markets in the United States and some of the areas where the comics and graphic novels in general are not that big until recently.
Are there still the magazines where you can lend comics?
Yes, there are rental stores in Korea where you can go and rent magazines and comic books, and that actually has been the major single reason why the Korean local manga market couldn't grow at past certain point, because a lot of people, most people actually, about 90% of people would go to those rental stores to rent those books instead of buying them. So even the biggest selling titles will not sell more than 10 to 20,000 copies. So yeah, but even that rental market is shrinking. So the market is much more gloomier than Japan right now in Korea. And since I've been talking about Korean market, the trend is like this. Like for those authors who are very well established, they have a fan base, so they can release new titles and the fans will notice them. But for new authors, emerging authors, it's become really hard to get noticed by the fans, because there are not that many magazines left in the market. So most new authors are coming on through websites, serializing their work on their own websites or portal sites. That's been the trend.
Yes. If we want to compare it to the situation in the Mediterranean countries, have you any numbers from Spain, from Catalonia?
No, I don't have numbers. I haven't prepared. I'm not as a good worker. I'm sorry. But yes, it's been changing. It's been changing for, I think, forever. It's been changing since I know. But in this moment, I think we have some numbers somewhere in form here. It says that in this moment in Spain, I think it's 43% of the sales are manga, of the total sales. Not manhwa, which unfortunately is still very small, and I think the little kids that are manga freaks, they don't consider it as good or as interesting as the Japanese or whatever. I'm talking about experience. So. And then we have about 30-something percent, 35, 34, something like that, which is superheroes. And there it's, of course, DC and EC, and Marvel, and so that Dark Horse, that through Spanish publishers are putting all their material there. And then there is left, I think, less than 20%, which are the sales of Spanish and European comics, which is really a shame. I mean, it's very hard right now for Spanish authors. There are a lot of young Spanish authors looking for a publisher or whatever, and they do it, and they go, a lot of them, to France or to the United States. Or there are quite a lot of Spanish authors that are working for Marvel or for DC, or or in France for Dargo, or for Delcourt or whatever, but that's how it is. I mean, there is no. I mean, we'll try to change it. I would like to sell more Spanish authors, and I would like to sell more European authors. But unfortunately, when I talk with friends, with publisher friends, the sales of European and Spanish authors, except few exceptions, are ridiculous. You lose money. I mean, but I hope this will change. I don't know if it will change or not, but it is how it is in this moment. In Spain, the sales are going up in general. I mean, the total amount of sales is growing, but the only thing that is growing is the manga and the American superheroes.
Claudio, in Actua BD, Sergio Toppi has given an interview, and he says the Italians have regarded the comic as something inferiore. What does he mean? Is it something to accept?
I think this is it's quite like Sergio Toppi is saying in the interview, but I don't think it was always like this. Unfortunately, in Italy, we lose all the experience made in 60s and 70s, while these artists like Hugo Pratt and Dino Battaglia and Krepak's comics were very, very important in the media culture of our country, and we don't have to forget that the first festival in Europe was held in Lucca, even before Angoulême, and the first magazines about comics were made in Italy, and the first manga were published in Italy. But then in 80s and in late 80s, there will be something. I don't know what, but all the major publishers, they just give up with comics. Mondadori give up, Rizzoli give up. So Rizzoli Corriere della Sera was publishing since 1908. So will be 100 years next year. The Corriere dei Piccoli, the first comics magazine for a young reader. And so without the work of big publisher that can make promotion, can make pressure on newspaper, media, etc. Comic in Italy will start an era of, we can say, only fun interest, except for Bonelli and was publisher who can be able to go on newsstand. So all the people who were reading comics in 80s or 90s,
Disney Italia.
Yeah.
Yes.
So all the people now that there are a lot of people who simply doesn't know the richness of the comics language, because they only were able to find some young stories like Disney in newsstand, or the popular Bonelli comics that are especially are almost entertainment comics. There are it's a monthly series, so the level is not like that. And so it's why Sergio Toppi, which is an artist, and he makes some stories for adult reader with some high level of culture too. So it's why he's saying this. But now in 2000 things are changing. I hope they will change more in the near future, because we have again the big major company taking care about comics, and we had a strange situation in newsstand with the newspaper, the two biggest newspaper in Italy, Repubblica and Corriere della Sera. There was like they sell newspaper with some DVD or books with, and they start some series of comics, but newspaper in Italy that it's huge companies, so they can start a new series by giving for free the first number, and it was Corto Maltese, la ballata del mare salato, in 500,000 copies for free in every newsstand of Italy. So these are numbers completely outside the comics market. And then the second and third and fourth of the series, they just sold about 300,000, 250,000, and all the series are selling like this in newsstand. So there are a lot of new readers starting knowing comics, and I hope after they will go to a comic shop, library, looking for new artists, maybe European artists, maybe Italian artists, and so that's now the situation changing.
I've read that in La Repubblica for the first time a manga was presented some weeks ago for the first time.
They made manga, you mean?
Yes, a manga from Go Nagai, La Divina Commedia.
Yes. They are. They talked with him when he was in Italy for the festival.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask Didier to present the numbers of Belgium, France.
Yes, I think the situation in France is today a kind of golden age. Absolutely, because you know we have in France 225 publishers publishing a large scale of different comics, different kind of comics. More than 1,300 authors are living with comics. and each year we publish more than 3,000 new titles, which is about 10 times more than 10 years ago. And in these new titles, more than 50% are translation of foreign material, mainly, of course, manga. And that's the point. Yeah, that's the point. So here you can see the share of the market. You can see that today the most important production, I talk about production of comics in France, is manga, which is #1 in production since 2 years, since 2005. And after, you can see you have an important place of the small press, with publisher like l'Association, especially with hits like Persepolis, and the comics is also an interesting part of the market, because the movies of Spider-Man, of X-Men were successful, and all these new titles were making a growing of the market, a very important growing. And we can see on the next scale that in the bottom line you have the French material production, and you can see the production is growing. In blue you have since 2000 till 2006. In blue you have the production of the manga, and in green, in red is the small press, publisher like l'Association, and in green it's the comics. And you can see that all the segments are growing, and we can say it's easy to see that no growing was against another one. So the French comics succeed to grow in the same time than the other. And what is really growing is the size of the market. There are more readers of comics today than 6 years before. And what is interesting is that we have learned about manga. What is interesting in the manga is they are cheap, interesting, with a lot of subjects very different, a large scale of interesting subject, a large scale of audience, and today in France we are thinking about the position of the price, the format of the book, in black and white or not. And there is even today a huge production of French manga, and well, we cannot say that today that it is a success on the market, but they are still on the market and they are profitable, which is important. And so you can think it is an idyllic presentation of the market, because this is the production, it's not the sales. And yes, it's different, but the publishers are not stupid. Some of them are not. The main publishers are not stupid. But if you can see the production is growing during 6 years along, it's a trend. You can accept it's a trend, even if there is mistakes, but it's a trend. It's a permanent trend. So, So let's see which are the publishers which are growing. What is interesting is to see that the main publisher which is growing is Soleil Publishing. It's a production. Don't forget, it's a production. It's not the turnover. It's very different. But yes, it's important to explain, because you see, when few minutes before, you could see on the market that in terms of production, the manga was number one. But in terms of turnover, the French comics is still on the top. Why? Because the price of a comics in French is higher than a manga. Thus, even if you sell a lot of manga, the turnover is not is still small. But another point is that the profit on the manga is more important than the profit in the French comics. So because it's in black and white, very cheap to produce, and even if the price is less than French comics, you can say that the French publisher have interest to publish manga because manga makes money. And so that's the situation. The publisher in France have to manage between a manga production and an internal production, a French production. And what is interesting, why Soleil is the most growing publisher in France? Because they don't publish manga. So if they want to be on the market, they have to publish a lot. And the number two is Media Participation, which is one of the main publishers of manga with the label Kana. And you can imagine that I suppose that Media Participation make more profits than Soleil. That's the global situation of the French market. Just a point about the other production, for example, manga for the phone. You can say today it doesn't exist in France. I think we are looking how is the business going in Japan and in Korea before to see if we will invest in it. But in terms of business, the market is about 40 million of books in 2006, around 400 million of euro. So you said $500 million. It's a bit. We are like in Japan a little bit. We sell a little bit less than the last year, and the turnover is a little bit less, especially because the manga are growing. When the manga are growing, the turnover is a little bit. But you explained that 25% of the the share of the manga on the Japan market is 25% for the manga. In France, it's only 12% of the comics is only 12% of the market. Yeah, the bestsellers are still European, and still I can say still even French. You have, of course, to make attention because that's not French. Because Titov is Swiss, Lucky Luke is Belgian, Cedric is Belgian, and Torgal is Polish. The author is Polish. So I think it's a good illustration of how as explained José Maria, a lot of artists in France are Italian, Spanish. Today France is a good receptacle of the European production, and I think the future is a co-production between the Europeans and also between Japanese and French artists we have to talk about, and also Chinese and Korean artists, because last year Soleil was publishing Korean author directly from Korea. It was not the license of a Korean publisher. It was Korean authors published in and other bestsellers recent in France. Of course, Naruto is number one for the manga. Each Naruto is a print run of 130,000 copies, and it's more than 1 million copies on the year because they publish a lot of titles. And Persepolis is a remarkable hit in France, since there is more than 1 million copies sold everywhere in the world, and 1 million of spectators in France only for the movie.
Thanks a lot. You have already reflected on the future of the market, and we have some reflections on the future made by Chibuza. May you sum up this?
Yes, the second report from my point of view is how the manga markets are doing overseas. This is it's very brief what I'm going to say, because totally all the manga published around the world together, this is very rough estimation, but it comes to $600 to $700 million, which is from the domestic market. If you compare it with the domestic market, it's 15% of what is published in Japan. And it's too much details to go into every market, so each country is doing, I can only say differently. And the point I wanted to say about the manga markets around the world is that actually any sort of very well-known manga in Japan will reach 20 countries around the world on average. But if you compare how English language fiction can travel around the world, well, in their average, they reach average of 60 countries. So it's not a matter of who is reaching more, but it's just if you just look at the statistics, and the English language has actually 100 years more history of working constantly with the overseas market. So in fact, Japan is 100 years behind. And so the issues that we have is the infrastructure. How do you work with Japan? There's an issue on the infrastructure that has to be improved. And then the other point is that we still have a lot of problem of piracy around the world, on paper and on internet. And so the readers in the world who want to read good quality manga, they deserve better. But there are more readers who are not serviced properly. And so there's between 60 countries and 20 countries on average is, well, roughly 40 countries different. So there's, I just want to say there's much more room to improve.
Thank you. Mr. Berenguer, what do you expect from the future?
Well, the future is dark. But no, I wanted to make a reflection of what we're talking about here, is that, for example, the growth of manga in Spain, and I guess in Europe in general, is it comes from the TV, from the television. Okay, as soon as Dragon Ball was running on the Spanish TV, the kids were crazy about Dragon Ball, and they even made photocopies of you know. And so I think in general the manga which sells, because there is a lot of manga that doesn't sell or sell very little, but the one that sells, that really makes those numbers that you showed us of this growth, comes from the television. And the superheroes, the growth of the superheroes comes from Hollywood, from the films, okay? And we have a problem in Europe. We don't have very little television, and we have very little films on European comics. So that's the problem, because it is clear that things are working together this way. And so I don't know the future. The future is that European publisher or European authors have to do films and have to do TV serials and have to interact. That's out.
Yes. What will you expect from it?
Before I go into the future, I want to add a few more comments about the current status of the Korean and US market. In Korea, a lot of authors went into create educational comics. Right now, just about all educational books for young children are either manhwa format or employ certain manhwa within their books. So, although the manhwa titles for the entertainment has shrunk dramatically, the overall market for manhwa has grown. We've seen growth. And about the same thing is happening in the United States as France. Although because the population and the economy is much bigger, the percentage of comics overall within the book market is much smaller in the United States. It's about 2 or 3% of the whole book market, and the total size of the market is similar to France. So we expect that the market within the United States will surpass the data of France within a few years. So a lot of new publishers are jumping into the United States market. So while there are more titles published each year, the competition is becoming higher. So there are really big sellers, and also as the market condition is producing really titles, those titles that don't get chance with the market. So I think the future this is the trend we've been seeing. There are really big selling titles and very small titles that are targeting niche markets, and there are not that many medium level titles. But what we've been seeing is that even in Korea, the manga is leading the market and dominating the market. It's about more than 60% of the comics market is shared by Japanese manga. So manga is creating new readers around the world, and it's bringing more readers to this comics medium as a whole. So the digital side of the media is also growing very fast. The power of television and movies is growing ever. So it's obvious that people will read less books, except for those countries where manga is new. People read less books in Japan and Korea and many other countries. So a lot of people spend their time on TV and on the internet. So the influence on the TV series will become only higher in the future. And also the more publishers will have to go utilize the technologies on the internet and mobile. And some companies like Apple will, I think, change the landscape on the mobile phone side in the United States, and similar things will happen after something like that will happens in large economy. So that's what I see in the future.
Yeah. Claudio, do you expect it in Italy too?
I think, as I said now, there is more interest from the big publisher in Italy, because it's an economical matter. The big company, they can have also interest in television, in cinema, like Media Participation in France is growing with different companies involved in animation, involved in video games and things like this. So this could be good in in Italy to make this step and having a real industry of comics. In Italy we don't have a comic publisher association, we don't have information to have statistics and things like this. We don't have the only real comic publisher which is also a company. It's Panini, it's a multinational. Also Bonelli is more a family company, even if it's real big, but Sergio Bonelli, it's the old father of the company. So for animation, it don't like mobile phone, it doesn't have a mobile phone. So no one is able to buy the rights of his character, and they are well known in Italy, like Tex, Dylan Dog, and but so you know what I mean. So that's a problem. But now things are changing. Big group like Repubblica and Rizzoli are taking care of comics. Something is happening in Europe. We have Planeta from Spain. They bought rights for DC Comics for both Spain and Italy, so they come into our markets publishing directly with the Planeta label. And Planeta is a big company. They are thinking like a big publishing company, not a small publishing company like the most of publishing company in Italy. So Panini now has to do something against Planeta, and I think it could be good for the market. I can see the small publisher starting to develop themselves. So I'm not afraid about the comics, the artist comics, the bande dessinée d'auteur or il fumetto d'autore, because I think with a bigger market there will be more opportunity also for Italian artists to do. The big sale are made by popular character and character from television and so on, but there will be a space for Bilal to make his comics also in Italy. I hope so.
Didier, you will have the last word this evening. But excuse me, before I want to ask everybody that afterwards we will have something to drink and to eat there. Everybody might come and join us to have a little afterwards discussion. And now the last word to Didier.
I'm the last word? 3 points. First, the world is changing indeed. I don't think the future will offer us so much opportunities for family companies like Bonelli. It was the same in France. Dupuis was a family, Lombard was a family, Dargaud was the name of Mr. Dargaud, and today they are the ownership of a group called Média Participation. Média Participation is not a little group, because the owner of Média Participation is the family Michelin, the band Michelin. So only the company Michelin is 20 times more important than Média Participation. It's important this fact. It means that there is a big capitalistic intensity in investing in the comics. That's the first point. That's the same for the Egmont Group. It's not a hazard if Egmont Group and Média Participation are the only companies in Europe which are investing in the movies, in developing video games with their own properties. Panini is another strategy. Panini is a strategy of distribution of licenses. So we have two strategies of company different on this market. The second point is that it's about the little publishers, the comics, or the author of comics. What is interesting is today some authors like Igor in Italy, or Frédéric Boilet, a French living in Tokyo, or for example Morvan, Jean-David Morvan is opening an office in Tokyo recently. Some authors are organizing a co-production of their own production, and for example Frédéric Boilet has published himself a book called Japan, published in 8 different languages. It's the same strategy with authors like Joan Sfar or Marjane Satrapi. They are more and more involved in the development of their own properties. Marjane was the realizator and the producer of his own movie. Joan Sfar is the author of The Cat of the Rabbit, which is a worldwide success. And Joan Sfar has created recently his own film production company. That's also a new trend of this new situation. The third point is, there was a sentence of Napoleon, and he said, when China will be awake, the world will trembling. And I'm very interested. Next month I will be in China at the summit in Hong Kong. I think I will meet you there, no? And I'm very interested in what's happened in China for the moment, and how they are interested and involved in the comic business. And there is a lot of efforts which are done right now, and they are very open to work together with European and Japanese companies. And I think that will change a little bit the world in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for listening. And now we will go over to the drinks and eats.